I am Emily, 25, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the responsible one in my family, the one who fixes things, who shows up, who cleans up everyone else's messes. My parents had me really young, and it always felt like I grew up right alongside them. While my friends were out doing teenage stuff, I was paying bills online, cooking dinner for my little brother Dylan, and helping my mom stretch a paycheck. It was like I became a third parent before I could even drive. And then there was my Aunt Sarah, my mom's younger sister. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, no matter how bad her decisions were. Sarah was always dramatic, impulsive, and perpetually starting over. Every few years, she'd announce that she was moving somewhere new or chasing a new dream, then crash back into our lives, broke and emotional, saying, "Nobody supports me." Every single time, my mom would open the door wide, hug her, and promise, "You'll always have a home here," which in family code meant Emily will pick up your slack. Sarah had 3 kids, Ava, who is 9, Mason, who is 6, and little Lily, who just turned 3. Their dad, Chris, disappeared years ago, though to be honest, no one was surprised. Sarah told everyone he was a deadbeat who ran off, but from what I heard growing up, it sounded more like she drove him to it with constant screaming matches and spending sprees. Then, the last time I babysat for her, she promised me $300 for a week. I stayed at her apartment, cooked, cleaned, got the kids to school, and dealt with tantrums and late-night wake-ups. At the end of the week, she handed me $40 and texted, "You should do it for family." That was the day I decided never again. Fast forward a year, I'm working full-time at a small accounting office, putting away every cent I can to move out of my parents' house. I am exhausted all the time, but proud of myself. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah calls. Her voice was sugary sweet, which instantly put me on edge. She says she needs me to watch the kids just for 2 weeks, while she goes on a business retreat. I asked, "Business retreat for what? You quit your job at the salon?" She immediately got defensive and said, "Not everything I do is your business. Just say yes." I told her no. I was working long hours and could not just drop everything to play mom for her again. She called me selfish. Then my mom got involved, begging me to help out family. I stood my ground. I said I was done being the free babysitter, the extra wallet, the one everyone calls when they make bad choices. 2 days later, it was a rainy Saturday morning. I had just started making coffee when my doorbell rang. I figured it was a delivery, but when I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Sarah was standing there, hair perfectly done, makeup on, suitcase in one hand, and her 3 kids clinging to her legs. Before I could even process what I was seeing, she pushed her way inside, let the kids sit on my couch, tossed their backpacks onto the floor, and said in the most condescending tone imaginable, "Finally be useful for once." Then she turned around, walked out, and before I could even open my mouth, she was in her car driving away. I just stood there, completely frozen. The kids looked at me like I was supposed to know what to do. Ava whispered, "Mom said you'd take care of us." Mason was already rummaging through the fridge, asking if I had pizza, and Lily started crying because she wanted her blanket, which of course Sarah had not packed. I grabbed my phone, called Sarah, and it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Come get your kids right now, or I'm calling the police." No response. I called my mom next, hoping she would tell me this was some misunderstanding, but all she said was, "Just help your aunt until she comes back. She's probably under a lot of stress." I said, "Mom, she literally abandoned her kids at my door. That's not stress, that's neglect." Mom sighed and whispered, "Don't overreact." Overreact. There were 3 kids in my living room watching cartoons and eating snacks like this was completely normal. I tried calling Sarah for hours. Nothing. No calls, no texts, nothing. Around 6 that evening, I gave up and fed the kids mac and cheese with some leftover chicken. I put them to bed in the guest room and sat in my kitchen just staring at my phone. Every minute that passed made my stomach twist tighter. I kept thinking, what happens if one of them gets hurt? What happens if she does not come back? The next morning, when I woke up and still had no response from Sarah, I made the hardest call of my life. I called Child Protective Services. I told them everything. Names, times, addresses, the fact that she had abandoned them with no warning and no plan. The woman who answered was calm and professional. Her name was Denise. She asked a few questions and said a caseworker would be there shortly. 2 hours later, Denise arrived. She was kind, gentle with the kids, and careful with her words. She looked at me and asked, "You're not their legal guardian, right?" I told her no. She nodded and said quietly, "Then you did the right thing." Ava looked scared and asked me, "Are we in trouble?" I knelt down and said, "No, sweetie, you're going somewhere safe for a little while." Mason was confused. Lily cried, and I felt my chest ache like my heart was splitting. But I knew, deep down, this was the only responsible thing to do. By that evening, my phone had blown up. 67 missed calls from Sarah, 23 from my mom. The first voicemail I listened to was just Sarah screaming, "What did you do?" The next one was, "You ruined my life, Emily. They took my kids." Then came the texts, paragraphs of insults, accusations, guilt trips. I didn't answer a single one. When I finally picked up one of Mom's calls, she was livid. She hissed, "You didn't have to involve the state. You should have waited." I said, "Waited for what? For her to come back after 2 weeks of partying in Vegas?" Mom went quiet. I told her that I had seen Sarah's Instagram story, cocktails by the pool, selfies with friends, captions like, "Living my best life." That's where she was while her children were crying in my guest room. Mom did not even deny it. She just sighed and said, "You could have kept it quiet." That sentence broke something in me. Because that was our family's way. I keep it quiet, sweep it under the rug, pretend everything is fine while the house burns down behind you. That night, I cried. Not because I regretted it, but because I realized how twisted our family's definition of help had become. Sarah came back 3 days after Child Protective Services took the kids, and the chaos that followed made me realize that she wasn't just irresponsible, she was dangerous in her own self-centered way. I was at work that Tuesday morning, halfway through a spreadsheet, when my coworker from the front desk buzzed me and said, "Hey, there's a woman outside yelling your name in the parking lot." My stomach dropped. I didn't even have to ask who. I walked to the window and saw Sarah pacing between the parked cars, her hair a mess, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy, screaming into her phone while pointing at the building. Within 5 minutes, security was escorting her off the property. She was shouting that I had stolen her children, that I was a jealous freak, and that everyone would see what kind of person I really was. It was humiliating. People from accounting were standing near the windows, pretending not to stare. I went home early that day because I just couldn't focus after that scene. Later that evening, I got a call from Denise, the CPS caseworker. She sounded calm, almost too calm, like she'd seen this 1,000 times before. She told me that Sarah had filed a report claiming I kidnapped her kids. I laughed in disbelief, but Denise said not to worry. They had documentation, timestamps, statements, and even doorbell camera footage of Sarah dropping them off with luggage and driving away. The police closed her report within hours. Then, Denise told me about the kids. They had been placed with a temporary foster family while the investigation was ongoing. She said the foster parents were kind, the house was tidy, and the children were doing surprisingly well considering everything. When she mentioned that Ava and Mason kept asking if I could visit them, something inside me cracked. I'd spent years resenting being the family babysitter, but hearing that they wanted to see me made all that anger dissolve into something else: grief, guilt, and protectiveness. I asked if I could apply to be their temporary guardian, and Denise explained that it wasn't that simple. There were procedures, background checks, home inspections. It would take time. Still, she said, it's not impossible. Meanwhile, Sarah was in full meltdown mode. I found out she had started a GoFundMe titled, "Help a Mother Get Her Babies Back from a Jealous Niece." The description was pure fiction. She claimed that I had called CPS because I wanted revenge, that I couldn't have children of my own, and that I was obsessed with hers. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that page, feeling my face burn. It wasn't even the lies that hurt most. It was that she knew exactly what buttons to press. She'd always had this talent for turning her own failures into someone else's fault. People actually started sharing it at first. Old family friends, people who didn't know the full story, even one of my mom's church friends donated $10. But once people saw the comments, it began to fall apart. One person wrote, "Didn't you post from Vegas last week?" Another said, "If your kids were stolen, why is CPS involved?" It didn't take long before the donations stopped. The total was $43 before the page was reported for misinformation and taken down. At work, my coworkers had seen it too. Someone found the fundraiser and showed it around during lunch. I wanted to crawl under my desk, but instead I laughed it off because what else could I do? One of them joked, "Your family could get its own reality show, The Babysitter from Hell." It was meant to be funny, but it stung. I'd worked so hard to build a normal life outside the drama, and now it had followed me right into my office. Things at home weren't much better. My mom was still furious at me, convinced I'd destroyed the family. She kept saying that Sarah was just struggling, as if that excused abandoning 3 children on a doorstep. My dad stayed quiet, which was his usual approach to conflict. Head down, no comment, retreat to the garage. I stopped visiting for a while because every time I did, Mom found a way to turn the conversation back to how the system tears families apart. A few weeks later, Denise called again. She sounded more serious this time. She told me that during their investigation, they discovered Sarah had prior neglect complaints. Not one, but 2. Both were from neighbors who reported seeing the kids left alone for hours. CPS had documented that she'd been warned multiple times to make arrangements for childcare or risk losing custody, so no, this wasn't her first time. The kids are still in foster care, but I finally got approved for supervised visits after passing the background check and home verification. It took weeks of paperwork, interviews, and home inspections, but when I got the call from Denise saying it was official, I cried right there at my kitchen table. I had been waiting for that moment since the day they were taken. Not because I wanted to play savior, but because I just wanted them to know they weren't forgotten. The first visit was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the CPS Visitation Center, a small building tucked behind the courthouse with cheerful murals on the walls and too many plastic toys scattered around. I was nervous the entire drive there. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel and my stomach felt like it was full of rocks. When I walked in, the receptionist recognized my name immediately and led me to a playroom. I could hear the kids before I saw them, a mix of giggles and someone singing the alphabet off key. Then the door opened and Ava came running toward me. She wrapped her arms around my waist so tightly that I could barely breathe. Mason followed close behind, holding something behind his back, and little Lily clung shyly to the caseworker's leg. Mason handed me a folded piece of paper with a crayon drawing. It was a picture of a house, all lopsided and colorful, with 4 stick figures labeled me, Ava, Lily, and M. There was no mom. I had to bite the inside of my cheek not to start crying right there. I hung that picture on my fridge when I got home later that day, and it's still there now. The visits became the best part of my week. Every session was just an hour, but those 60 minutes meant everything. We colored and built towers out of blocks and sometimes just talked about school or cartoons. Ava had started to act more like the responsible one, always checking that her siblings were okay, and it broke my heart to see her take on that kind of weight at her age. Mason was his usual energetic self, but I could see flashes of anxiety when someone mentioned their mom. Lily, who had barely spoken the first time, eventually started calling me Emmy. The caseworkers said they were adjusting well, but the emotional scars were obvious if you knew how to look. While the kids were settling into their new normal, Sarah was unraveling. Word spread through the family that she'd lost her apartment after missing rent for 2 months. She'd been couch surfing with friends until that fell apart too. Then came the arrest. Unpaid parking tickets that had turned into warrants. I only found out because someone from Mom's church saw her name on a local police blotter. She spent a weekend in county jail before being released, and when she got out, she immediately started posting vague, dramatic quotes on Facebook. Things like, "Family betrays you first," and "Loyalty is rare, remember that." Every post had at least 3 crying face emojis, and 1 or 2 people commenting, "Stay strong, girl." My mom still insists that she's just lost. Every time I see her, she tries to explain Sarah's behavior like she's some tragic character in a movie rather than a grown woman who abandoned her kids and went partying in another state. I used to argue, but now I just let her talk. It's easier that way. Mom will never see Sarah clearly, and I've stopped expecting her to. My dad doesn't say much either. He just looks tired, like he's seen this cycle too many times. A few weeks ago, Denise asked if I would consider becoming the kid's permanent guardian if Sarah didn't get her act together. It wasn't a shock, but hearing it out loud hit differently. I told her yes, but only if it was what was best for them. I didn't want to be another unstable adult in their lives. I wanted them to have safety, structure, and love, whatever that looked like. Financially, I'm doing okay. I got a small raise at work and finally moved into my own one-bedroom apartment. It's small, but it's mine, and I'm saving for something bigger in case things move in that direction. The thought of having them here one day, 3 little beds lined up against the wall, school backpacks by the door, is equal parts terrifying and comforting. Of course, Sarah can't stand the idea of me stepping up. She started trying to contact me again, but not directly. She used a cousin as her middleman, sending messages through him like we were in some twisted game of telephone. The first message was a guilt trip, claiming that I could fix this if I just told CPS it was all a misunderstanding. She said she'd learned her lesson and just needed a second chance. It took everything in me not to laugh at the absurdity of it. I told our cousin to deliver one message back to her. I said, "There's no misunderstanding when you abandon your kids on a couch." It's official now. I have full custody of the kids. The court hearing was last month, but even now it still feels surreal to say those words out loud. After nearly a year of uncertainty, paperwork, home visits, background checks, and court delays, it finally ended. Sarah's parental rights were terminated after she skipped multiple hearings and failed every requirement the judge gave her. The final blow came when she tested positive for meth. Denise, the caseworker who had been with us since the beginning, said it was one of the most clear-cut cases of neglect she'd seen in years. The judge's exact words were that Sarah's pattern of neglect was consistent and uncorrected. That phrase stuck in my head. Consistent and uncorrected. It summed up everything that had led us here. The hearing room was quiet when the judge announced the decision. Ava was sitting beside me, holding my hand so tightly that my fingers went numb. When the judge finished reading, she looked up at me with these wide, tired eyes and whispered, "Can we go home now?" That moment hit me harder than any gavel strike ever could. I nodded, and we walked out of that courthouse not as visitors, not as temporary guardians, but as a family. Back at my apartment, everything felt smaller, but warmer. My one bedroom was never meant for 4 people, but we made it work. I turned the bedroom into a shared space for Mason and Lily, 1 twin bed, 1 mattress on the floor, and a mountain of stuffed animals that seemed to multiply overnight. Ava took the pull-out couch in the living room, and I promised her that next year we'd move somewhere with more space, maybe a yard, maybe even a dog. For now, this was home. That first night together was chaos in the best way. There were boxes everywhere, clothes mixed with toys, and the faint smell of cardboard in the air. I ordered pizza and we ate it straight from the box while watching Finding Nemo on my tiny TV. When Dory said, "Just keep swimming," Ava laughed, pointed at the screen, and said, "That's what we did, right?" And she was right. We just kept swimming through every storm, every court date, every visit room full of uncertainty until we finally found solid ground. The kids have been settling in better than I expected. Ava started taking an interest in cooking. She stands on a stool beside me while we make breakfast and insists on flipping pancakes herself. Mason's obsessed with dinosaurs now. There are plastic raptors and T-Rexes hidden in every corner of the apartment. Lily sleeps curled up like a kitten, always holding the same frayed blanket that the foster family gave her when she first arrived there. There are moments of quiet joy that I never thought I'd get to experience. Mason's giggles when I tickle him, Ava's shy smile when she gets a math problem right, Lily humming softly to herself before bed. Of course, it hasn't all been easy. There are nights when the kids wake up crying, nightmares about being left behind or taken away again. Ava still flinches when someone knocks on the door unexpectedly. Mason asks if Mommy is mad when he sees police cars, and Lily doesn't talk about her mother at all. Not a single word. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the paperwork is finalized, but we're working on healing, one day at a time. A week after the court's decision, I got a letter. It was handwritten, no return address, just my name on the front. In shaky handwriting I recognized immediately. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a short message. "You took everything from me. You'll regret it." That was it. No apology, no reflection, just bitterness. I stared at the paper for a few minutes, my heart pounding, then I folded it back up, tucked it into the drawer for a while, and later that night, I tore it to pieces and threw it away. Because the truth is, I didn't take anything from her. I didn't steal her children or destroy her life. She did that all on her own. All I did was give those kids the stability she refused to provide. I didn't take her kids, I just gave them back the life she threw away. Now, every morning, I wake up to the sound of three little voices arguing about cereal or cartoons, and I realize how far we've come. The walls of the apartment are covered in drawings and school projects. There's laughter echoing through the rooms instead of silence. It's messy, loud, and crowded, but it's ours. And if you followed this story from the beginning, if you've been here through the chaos, the heartbreak, and the healing, thank you. Life doesn't always hand out neat endings, but this one feels like the closest thing to peace we'll ever get. So, if you've ever had to set a boundary, protect someone, or walk away from a toxic family dynamic, let this be a reminder. Doing the right thing isn't always quiet, and it isn't always easy, but it's worth it. If you made it this far, hit that like button, leave a comment, and tell me, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to subscribe because sometimes surviving your own family makes for the most unbelievable stories of all.